Hello everyone, and welcome to lesson 9.2B. I've entitled this video, Independence of the Tropical North. This video is going to cover pages 282 to 285. Independence. By the late 1700s, many Spanish colonists who were born in the Americas wanted independence from their Spanish rulers. Their chance came in 1808, when the French ruler Napoleon invaded and conquered Spain. Spain found it difficult to fight the French in Europe and to rule its colonies. Some of the colonists in the Americas took this opportunity to fight for independence from Spain. Question number 1. By the late 1700s, what did many Spanish colonists who were born in the Americas want? They wanted their independence from Spain. Question 2. Which world leader and country invaded Spain in 1808? It was the French ruler Napoleon Bonaparte. Question 3. How did the Spanish colonists in South America use 1808 as a way to fight for their independence? Well, they realized that Spain would have a hard time fighting Napoleon and the people fighting for independence, so they took their chance. Overthrow of colonial rule. Ecuadorians rose up against Spanish rule in 1809. Colombians and Venezuelans soon followed. A long war began, at first mainly between groups who remained loyal to Spain and those who favored independence. After the Spanish expelled the French from Spain in 1814, Spain's king sent troops to South America to try to restore Spanish control. In the south, resistance to the Spanish was led by Argentine general José de San Martín. In the north, Venezuela's Simón Bolívar led the revolt. And they are pictured here. Here is San Martín, and here is Bolívar. Spanish forces were not finally defeated until 1823. In 1819, however, Bolívar united Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, and Ecuador to form an independent republic called Gran Colombia. He became its first president. Question number 4. How did José de San Martín impact the history of South America? Well, he helped lead the revolution in the South. Question number 5. How did Simón Bolívar impact the history of South America? He led the revolution for Venezuela. Question number 6. What three areas became known as Gran Colombia? Venezuela, Colombia, Panama. And you could throw in Ecuador there to make it 4. Gran Colombia. And the next question, who became the first president of Gran Colombia? In number 7 there. That is Simón Bolívar. Independent countries. Gran Colombia broke apart after Bolívar's death in 1830. Ecuador and Venezuela formed independent countries. Colombia and Panama remained united as one country. In the early 1900s, Panama separated from Colombia and became independent. Independence and self-government did not bring democracy and peace. Wealthy landholders competed with wealthy city business people for control of the government. Conflict over the Catholic Church's role in society added to the unrest. The tensions resulted in civil wars in Colombia and Venezuela. Throughout the history of Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela, military or civilian leaders often ruled as dictators. And now we can answer question 8. Why did Gran Colombia break apart in 1830? Well, Simón Bolívar died, and then once his leadership was gone, it was hard for them to stay together. Question 9. Why did independence and self-government not bring democracy and peace to the tropical north as it did in the United States? Well, they really struggled. There was a lot of conflict. You had a lot of conflict between the wealthy landholders and the wealthy city business people. Everybody wants that power. You also had conflict over how big of a role was the Catholic Church going to have in society. So that balance of religion versus state. And so you had a lot of unrest and you had civil wars. And it made it very hard for these areas to have the same sort of peaceful democracy that we have enjoyed. And also, they had military and civilian leaders that often ruled as dictators, so they would take power for themselves and not have democracy. Labor and immigration. While Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela struggled with self-government, British, Dutch, and French Guyana remained colonies. The British abolished slavery in their colony in 1838. The French and the Dutch followed in 1863. To replace the once enslaved workers, British and Dutch plantation owners recruited laborers from India and China. The Dutch also imported workers from their colony in Indonesia. The immigrants had to work on their colony's sugar, rice, coffee, or cacao plantations for a required length of time. At the end of their contract, they were free. Many stayed in the colony and, like the formerly enslaved people they replaced, founded towns along the coast. In 1852, France began sending convicted criminals to its colony. More than 70,000 convict laborers arrived between 1852 and 1939. The worst convicts were imprisoned off the coast on notorious Devil's Island. And now we can answer some questions. Question number 11. How did the British and the... Wait, is that where we're at? Let me see here. Nope, sorry. I turned the page too soon there. Question 10. What did Britain, France, and the Netherlands all make illegal in South America by 1863? Slavery. And now we're ready for the backside. Question 11. How did the British and the Dutch get workers to work on the plantations in South America once that slavery had been abolished? Well, they recruited workers from India and China, and then also the Dutch imported workers from Indonesia. Question 12. What type of people did France send to French Guiana in 1852? They sent convicts, people that had been convicted of crimes or criminals. Challenges and change. The political and social problems that plagued Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela after independence continued through most of the 20th century. Venezuela, for example, did not achieve a peaceful transfer of power between opposing groups until 1969. Meanwhile, the region's other countries, which gained independence in the 20th century, experienced similar issues and challenges. Question 13. What did Venezuela struggle with until 1969? A peaceful transfer of power. And that is where one group of people give power to the other group of people even though they don't agree. That's what we have in this country and have had for most of our country's history, with a few exceptions. Gaining independence. Independence came slowly for Guyana and Suriname. The British granted their colony limited self-government in 1891. In 1953, all colonists were given the right to vote and allowed to elect a legislature. Guyana finally gained independence in 1966. Colonists in Dutch Guiana obtained the right to vote in 1948 and self-government in 1953. The colony became the independent country of Suriname in 1975. The people of French Guiana became French citizens and gained the right to vote in 1848. In 1946, French Guiana's status changed from a colony to an overseas department or district of the country of France. French Guiana remains part of France and has representatives in France's national legislature. And now we can answer question number 14. What happened to Guyana in 1966? They finally gained their independence. Question 15. What happened to Suriname in 1975? They also gained their independence. Question number 16. Why is French Guiana not considered a country today? It's not considered a country today because it is part of France. It was a colony at one point for France, but now it's a district of the country of France. So it's not a country, it is part of France. Revolutions and borders. The tropical North's lack of strong, stable governments has resulted in major unrest in its countries, as well as conflicts between them. In Colombia, assassinations and other violence between feuding political groups took as many as 200,000 lives between 1946 and 1964. In the 1960s and 1970s, small rebel groups began making attacks throughout the country in hopes of overthrowing the government. Ecuador's government has not maintained control over its remote region, which lies in the Amazon basin, to the east of the Andes. In the 1940s, Peru seized some of this land. The two countries often clashed, until a settlement was finally reached in 1968. In 2008, tensions between Ecuador and Colombia were strained after Colombian forces attacked a Colombian rebel camp in Ecuador's territory. In 2010, Colombia accused Venezuela of allowing Colombian rebels to live in its territory. War was narrowly avoided. Guyana's independence renewed an old border dispute with Venezuela that arose when Guyana was a British colony. The dispute was not settled until 2007. Another dispute arose on Guyana's eastern border with Suriname, after Suriname gained independence in 1975. Several clashes took place before that boundary was settled in 2007. Guyana also experienced years of social and political unrest as its African and South Asian populations competed for power. Like Guyana, Suriname has faced internal unrest since independence. The military removed civilian leaders in 1980 and again in 1990. Meanwhile, rebel groups of Maroons, the descendants of escaped slaves, disrupted the country's bauxite mining in an effort to overthrow the government. The army responded by killing thousands of marooned civilians. Thousands more fled to safety in French Guiana. And now we can close with the last question, question 17. What has led to a lot of unrest and chaos in many of the tropical north countries in modern times? They've had a real hard time keeping a strong, stable government. There's been a lot of conflicts between rebel groups. They've had democracy, then it's overthrown by military leaders, and back to democracy. It's just a whole mess of, it's been very hard for them to get a consistent, stable government. There's been a lot of upheaval, a lot of military overthrowings, and it's not been as stable as our country's history. A lot of chaos trying to establish these democracies in South America. Well, thank you for watching. Before we go, I have this for you. For those of you that like the Office TV show, I declare independence! Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.